Down to the business. We've now got, she told me to introduce her as Ceri from the museum. She said, everybody knows me. So there we are. She is going to give us a talk on, get it right, Dic Pendaren, either hero or villain. So without any further ado, please will you welcome Ceri from the museum.
Thank you. Have a drink. I didn't say everybody knows me. I didn't say that bit. What I said was, he said, what do you want me to say? I said, I'm a retired teacher. I now volunteer at the museum, Ceri from the museum. I said, a lot of people do know me. I said, and the most important thing is I joined U3A last Friday. So I'm now one of you. And I'm in the ukulele band. All right? That's important. Now then, okay, well, good afternoon. Dic Pendaren. Now, quite a lot of you will know a lot of what I'm going to say in different ways. I've got to bring it all together, hopefully, and give you some new information. I think possibly, I don't know if you have ever seen this pamphlet. It was sold by Porthcawl Historical Society some years ago now, and to make money for their historical society. And a lady called Sally Roberts-Jones did a little biography of Dic Pendaren. And that's all I knew, really, until I read Alexander Cordell's book, The Fire People. And I looked online, and I read Gwynalf Williams's book, and, and such things. And I did teach this for a short while when I was in Hawthorne. But I tended to go from this, from Gwynalf Williams, and so on. And you will find I got a small film at the end, a little PowerPoint to music. And you will see so many mistakes in that now. Well, not so, there's about 4 mistakes in it. Because, before I start my talk, I have to thank John Morgan, Shannon Mangini, and Stefan Ap Dafydd, who contacted me about 3 years ago because they knew that I was very interested in this subject, because I'd been to Cyfarthfa Castle to look at other archives. Because Stefan Ap Dafydd has done a book, and with the help of John Morgan and Sharon Mangini, they have done incredible research into the life of Dic Pendaren. Things that we did not know. It's there. I've got a copy on my iPad, as you do today, because they've allowed me a copy. I don't know where you can buy one, but I've been very privileged. And therefore, the information that I can now add to the talk I would have done 3 years ago is going to make this hopefully a much better talk. So I just want you to know there are things you may think, oh, what's that? Okay? Right, well, you're talking about a man who, to be honest, there are only 2, before Sharon Mangini and John Morgan and Stefan Ap Dafydd, there were only 2 facts that anybody knew about Dic Pendaren. He was hanged on the 13th of August, and he was buried on the 14th. And that's it. There is nothing else. Even Sally Roberts' book is suggested. It suggests things because nobody actually knows. But, as I say, we now can say a bit more than that. Obviously, his story is linked with the Reform Bill of 1832, the election, the first election for non-landed gentry. The knobs, if you don't mind me saying that. And he also is linked with the Industrial Revolution and the rights of workers, workers' conditions. Okay, now, we'll take it at a pace because I've got to bring quite a few strands together. Now then, let's go to the iron. Let's go to Industrial Revolution first. Iron the Industrial Revolution came, yes, 18th century into 19th. But there was, just for you to know, evidence, because Dic Pendaren is linked with Merthyr, as you know, and there was iron working in Merthyr before Dic Pendaren's time, just for you to know. It was more like the Iron Age. They found some iron and they melted it, then they made some pots. But it did start to go into a bit of a cottage industry. Because Merthyr is absolutely, it has exactly what you need. It's got coal and it's got iron ore, and that's what you need to make iron. if you know, for example, Porthcawl, you've got the John Brogden came down here for both the Tondy Ironworks and then went and sunk coal at the Ogmore Valley. He put the Ogmore Valley coal with the iron ore in the area into the Tondy Ironworks. But that was that was local. What we're going to see now is international. I mean, at one point, Cyfarthfa Ironworks and Dowlais Ironworks were the biggest in the world. So we're not talking about little Tondy Ironworks now. We're talking about something much, much bigger. Right, okay. Come here now, that's it. Right, what was life like in Merthyr then? Before we had, no high street, one cottage, one pub, or was it a pub? There must have been a church nearby, mind. When I see this, I thought there has to be a church, because there's always a church, there's a pub. And there were about 2,000 people living around the Merthyr area. And that was it. Before iron was found, before coal was found, before they were wanted. Right, it comes to Merthyr. Now then, look at that. Is it hell you're taking us? Now that's a quote, actually, out of Sally Roberts' book. It's about a couple that land at Talbot and go towards the Carmarthen Works. And when she sees the Carmarthen Works, she says, is it hell you're taking? Is it to hell you're taking us? Well, if she thought Carmarthen was hell, well, this was Dante's Inferno. There were 4 blast furnaces in 1784 in Merthyr, and there were 41 blast furnaces by 1850. You can imagine. I mean, when Dic Pendaren and his family went to Merthyr, I'm sure they must have seen Merthyr in the night before they even got there. I mean, the light. And again, if you read Alexander Cordell's books, The Rape of the Fair Country, you have that wonderful description of the light sky lit up by the furnaces. Right, now then, sorry about that, I don't know what that is, we can't get rid of it. How did the Industrial Revolution come to Merthyr? Now then, these are the 4 main works. 59, you can see Dowlais. Dowlais was Thomas Lewis and Partners, but eventually was sold or passed over to John Guest. John Guest was initially the manager, and then he became a partner and took on the running of the business. Dowlais Works then moved from him to his son, Thomas Guest, to his grandson, the one we all know best, Josiah John Guest. Or John Josiah Guest, I can't remember which way it goes round. He is the man who lived during the time of Dic Pendaren. He is the man that Our Lady Charlotte Guest married in 1832 and owned part of Nottage for a short while because her son, Ivor Bertie Guest, became Lord Wimborne, and the Lord Wimborne estates had part of Nottage. Just something for you to know. But the Dowlais Works themselves, Josiah John Guest, his son then, Ivor, he didn't want to take this on. He sold it out to G.T. Clark. G.T. Clark then sold it on to Keane, and they became GKN, taken up with British Steel, and they still exist today. It all started with the Dowlais Ironworks. And in 1826, the Dowlais Ironworks were producing 15,000 tons a year of iron. The Plymouth Works and Cyfarthfa were initially owned by, leased from the Earl of Plymouth by Anthony Bacon. The Plymouth Works then, he leased on to Humphrey, who then passed it on to Anthony Hill. And then Cyfarthfa Works is the one we all know of, the Crawshays. Yeah, it was Richard Crawshay, then William Crawshay, but it was his grandson, William II, I call him, Crawshay, that existed during Dic Penderen's time and did the most to develop the Cyfarthfa Ironworks. And Pendaren Ironworks was originally taken on by Humphrey. He then passed it on to Thompson, and Thompson did what he could, but in the end, I'm afraid. The one thing I will tell you about the Pendaren Ironworks, actually I just remembered, Pendaren Ironworks made cables for the Menai suspension bridge in 1816 and made the railway lines for the Liverpool to Manchester railway line in 1830. It was a very small works with big ambition. And in 1804, 21st of April, 1804, that's the ironworks where Richard Trevithick was encouraged to try out his train for the first time. He used it at the Pendaren Ironworks. Instead of horses, they tried Dick's train, or whatever you call it. Right, now the thing about these is the Dowlais Ironworks still exists as GKN, but the others all, in the end, disappeared. Plymouth and the Pendaren Ironworks disappeared in the 19th century, and Cyfarthfa after the First World War. And why? Because of the Bessemer process. I have to tell you this now so I won't forget, you'll understand. The Bessemer process was a process of turning iron into steel. And if you did not get on board by 1850, 1860, you were left behind because steel was the new innovation. And that's what happened. Dowlais did get on board. They built the first rolling mill in the world. They turned out the first piece of sheet steel in 1865. So Dowlais was ahead of the game. Therefore, they survived. Just for you to know about the ironworks anyway. So you've got to know where we're going now. Now then. Why did the ironworks come to Merthyr in the first? What made them prosper? At that time, in the late 18th century, well, you've got war. War needs weapons, you know, it needs mechanical things and all sorts. That should be 1784. I mean, there's missing whatever's gone there. There's something to do with that, I think. Henry Court's puddling process. Now, what that means is, originally, it was cast iron. When Adam Darby up in Iron Bridge, who made the first iron, he turned it out into a sand, right? And it had it going down a channel with channels coming off it. This is the first now. This is beginning of the 18th century now when he's trying this out for the first time. That's why Iron Bridge is so famous. And when somebody saw it, they said, oh, it looks like a sow with its little piglets. And they called it pig iron. And that's where the term comes from. And pig iron is cast iron. But of course, it's very rigid, very heavy, you know. Well, little Henry Court there, he learnt that if you stirred, a bit like a cake, if you got the ingredient, if you got the bubbles out of the cake and you kept stirring it, it got smoother and smoother and smoother and became wrought iron. Now, it was the wrought iron that is more malleable and therefore lent itself then to cannons and, well, to more bigger production of cannons and guns. And, of course, you've got to remember, up in the northwest, you've got the textile industry, which is already calling for machinery because they've got, you know, their textiles going. Right, so they want machinery, they want iron. And they want a better type of iron. The Glamorganshire Canal opened because once all this iron is going to be produced, it's going to be exported. And you know, I can't remember the name of the guy, but it was a bit like Llanvi Dyffryn Railway to Porthcawl. You know, the first man who brought the coal down took 6¼ hours in a tram, you know, on a horse. Well, it's a bit like that with Merthyr. When they took the first lot of coal and iron ore down to Cardiff, it took an inordinate amount of time. So they had to build something that was quicker. And, of course, you've got the canal age. That came in at the end of the 18th century. And, of course, you've got the Napoleonic Wars. So you can see there's a great demand for iron. Therefore, here we go. That's it. Just me being clever. Okay? Right, huge demand for iron. Right, now then, iron, great demand, labour needed. Now at the time, 1760 onwards, was the agricultural revolution. The land was doing very well, thank you very much, but they weren't paid, there wasn't work for everyone. The pay wasn't very good. Suddenly, these iron masters want this you know, incredible amount of labour and are offering a much better wage. Well, everybody comes to the towns. And of course, when they come to the towns start to grow, which is what initiates and kicks on the electoral reform. Because before that, the landed gentry are voted into Parliament. You know, they're into the House of Commons, they're into the House of Lords. But as the towns grow, people want to be noted, they want to be recognised, they want their voice. Anyway, huge wages came in. Now then, Merthyr's population by 1831, remember I said 2,000 in 1760, it's 40,000 people by 1831, and don't think for 1 minute they built enough houses or enough dwellings or there was enough room. But the one thing about this which is quite something, is twice the size of Swansea and 4 times the size of Cardiff. Cardiff, well, in 1832, when the Reform Bill was finally passed, Merthyr got its first MP because it was big enough to have it, and that was Josiah John Guest. Cardiff didn't have an MP for years. Swansea District had one, but just shows you how little Cardiff was at that time. Okay. What was it like to live in Merthyr? Well, I'm giving you a lot of clues. Overcrowding. Working conditions were horrendous. Now, the one thing, there'd been quite a few depressions in the iron industry. There was one in 1818 and another one in 1829. There'd also been a walkout in 1816 by the Dowlais workers and the Cyfarthfa workers for more money because of working conditions. People were they weren't going to take things lying down anymore. They weren't going to be subservient anymore. And unfortunately, the depression in the iron industry laid people off. But Merthyr had a form of parish relief. So not everybody who came to Merthyr came to work. They came for the relief because they were starving. There weren't jobs anywhere at certain points. Working conditions, I don't think you need me to tell you that. I mean, the little children we used. And, life expectancy was horrendous. All right, you'll see more of that as we go along. Now, gang culture. Originally, in 1831, most of the people in Merthyr would have been Welsh. They'd have come up from Carmarthen, Cardiganshire, Glamorganshire, most Glamorganshire, Monmouthshire. But they also came over the border from Gloucestershire and Somerset. The Irish, as yet, were just starting to come, right? Because a lot of Irish end up in Merthyr by the 1840s, 50s, okay? But because of this, people are starving, you could say. People are desperate in many ways because there's not enough jobs going around. The living conditions are terrible, working conditions. Crime. It's a hotbed for crime, more or less. People are desperate. And therefore, people's little areas tend to accumulate into some sort of gang. For example, there's an area of Merthyr at that time called China, and the gang leader of China was known as the Emperor, and nobody messed with the Emperor. So it was and of course there were no police like we know today. Everything was done by the army or the militia, and it was special constables. They weren't even appointed. It was usually the army. Okay, so there was a lot of public disorder. Sanitation, well, they threw it out the window, And if you walked in it, sorry. There was nothing. There was no sanitation. I always remember when I was up in Sheffield, when the Sheffield Steel was taking off, they had their metal industry up there. And there was a row of houses in Sheffield, and every floor had a family in it. One room had a family in it. And there was a basement to this one block. And in the basement of the end of the row, the cesspit was next to that. And one morning, the family who lived in the basement got out of bed and stepped straight into the sewerage because it had overflowed. I mean, and that just gives you some idea. It's a bit exaggerated, possibly, but I think not too much. Right. Well, they ate meat once a week if they were lucky. Otherwise, they lived off the land. And they drank ale because water was just, well, you couldn't drink water. It was filthy. Disease, cholera, typhoid. High death rates. Now then, what do you think the average age of somebody in Merthyr in 1835 was? 18. Only 1 in 5 children survived. 18 at that time, because there was a huge cholera epidemic, plus the conditions. 18 was the average age. Right, well, obviously all this leads to radicalism. That's why we go into the electoral reform. Okay, let's go. Oh, there's a picture. Although it's Punch in 1852, it gives you it gives you an idea of what Merthyr may have looked like. I mean, if you look at this, you've got the coffin being taken out over everything. The kids are playing in the horse poo. She's having a good fag because it's the only way she can keep the flies away, I should think. And, I mean, it's just horrendous. Good beds, look. How many fleas, I don't know. Right. Now then, amongst all this squalor, we've got the Iron Masters. And of course, Crochet builds Cyfarthfa Castle. And Alexander calls it brilliant wealth in the midst of the sewer poverty of Pantmorlais and China, where the shift beds of the workers never grew cold. Because that's another thing. Sometimes there were two families living in the same room, and the night worker would sleep during the day, and the day worker would sleep during the night. So the bed never got cold. Right, Dic Pendaren. I know you've come for Dick, but you've got the idea now. We've set the scene. So here he is, our Dick. Well, he was born next to Tesco's in Porthcawl. His mother didn't have far to go for the groceries. No. I made Paul, husband, come with a camera now to where we had worked out where Dic Pendaren's cottage was. It was a white cottage, lovely white cottage, these whitewashed cottages, 1 room, 2 rooms maybe, and the family were in there. Now, we think it's around here, and therefore we looked from where we think the cottage is down the road, and this just happens to be Tesco's. All right? Okay. And there we're looking from Tesco's, again from his cottage, up at the mountain. You'll understand why in a minute, why we're looking up at the mountain, which is my brother-in-law's mountain, by the way, but that's nothing to do with the story. Right. Now, there we are. His cottage would have been around here. Now, that bridge existed when Dick was alive. And he crossed that bridge every Sunday to go up to that mountain to go to church. There we are. He went down the motorway. But he went up. They walked every Sunday up to Goitra, where there was a Calvinistic Methodist room, not even a church, but they went every Sunday. There we are. We're looking back now from the church, and there we are. There we are, Goitra. Right, there's the church. Now, there's the Welsh. Now, what does that say, Mabel? Can you see it? Cerllaw ar fan hwn yr oedd. Am I speaking right? Hen dir chwyrdd y Dyffryn. I think it says church in Dyffryn. There we are. Oh. Anyway, there was a Calvinistic Methodist church there. And that's where Dick went to school. Went to Sunday school. Now then, Dic Pendaren. They believe his father, Lewis, married his mother, Elizabeth Maybury. They married in 1792 in the parish of Margam. Their son John was born in 1790. So you can see they weren't such good Calvinistic Methodists, but they moved then to Tydfil, more or less, where he was a labourer. Because if you listen to Sally Roberts, he worked in Tydfil coal pit. He didn't. He was a labourer, according to the other people. You've got different evidence here. And Dick was one of 6 children. A brother John, then Mary, then Elizabeth, then Richard Lewis, that's Dick, was born in either 1808, 1809, they're not sure. Then there was Sarah, and then there was Matthew. All right? There's no proof of any of this. I mean, where they got Dick's birth date from is from his death date, if you see what I mean, and work back. They don't know the actual day he was born. They just know it was that year, sometime in that year. All right? And Dick's parents then, why was Dick called Dic Pendaren? Some think that the cottage they were born in here was from Pendaren, and that his father was originally from that area. But there's another reason, which I think is more plausible myself. He gets arrested and he's put in jail. And there's another man in jail with him, which you'll learn about, called Lewis. And he was also, the Lewis chap was also known as Lewis the Huntsman. But he was from Pendaren. He was also known as Lewis Pendaren. So whilst they were both in jail together, these people, the ones I was telling you about, they seem to think that, he's Lewis the Huntsman. We must be Lewis Pendaren then. They've accidentally given him the name. But he's known as Dic Pendaren. Nobody's actually sure why, but we now we know him as that. Okay, and the Methodists eventually moved down to Aberavon. But there we are. Now, Dick goes now to Merthyr. He goes over about 1815, right, with his parents, with the whole family moved to Merthyr. All right. There we are. They do say, that's not a very good one, we won't look at that. They do say that Alexander Cordell will tell you on the way to Merthyr, he met the Kevin Riders, and he fought them off like Superman. Because Dick was a very big man. He was a big man. The original book tells you he could read and write, and yet his marriage certificate's got a cross, so he couldn't read and write. Otherwise, he would have signed it. But he was a big man. That is true. And he was an iron miner. He wasn't a coal miner. And iron miners have to be very big chaps, very strong chaps, because they move in the iron ore. Right. Now then, he's gone over to Merthyr, so now he's gone into a political climate. It's a boiling point. It's a cauldron. Merthyr is boiling. He gets in 1815. I told you already that the Dowlais workers had gone on strike in 1816. I mean, things are starting to... He arrives at a time when the political climate in this country is taking off. But how many riots do you think we had in this country between 1750 and 1840, Roger Thomas? I'm going to have him back. I've been waiting 40 years for this. There's my history teacher. If I've got anything wrong, it's his fault. No. 1750 to 1840 in Britain. How many riots? No, it's an unfair question. You are right, hundreds. There were 700 riots in Britain because it was breaking out all over. The working class wanted a voice. You know, in the countryside they wanted it. In the towns they wanted it. You know, they were being exploited and they wanted a voice. You've heard of some. You've heard of the swing riots, the Luddite riots, St. Peterloo riots. You know, you've heard of some of them. Well, 700 riots already. So can you imagine the authorities are not going to take any riot that's going to happen lying down? They're frightened already. Because not only have you got these riots going on in Britain, the French king has just had his head taken off. You know, there's a revolution over the water. You've got Dr. Richard Price saying there's nothing wrong with that. You know, everybody's frightened to death. I mean, the anxiety in this country must have been huge. You know, because the little people are rising up and they've got to try and keep them in their place. Right. So the main causes, I don't have to tell you, we've been through it already. There we are. Living conditions, working conditions, rising prices. And eventually, Lord John Russell puts a bill before Parliament in April of 1831 and says, come on, we've got to change the constituencies. You can't have a little place up in Appleby in Cumbria with 2 MPs, and they got, 1 MP and 2 voters. I mean, you've seen Blackadder. I'm sure you've seen the one where they got 1 man, they got 1 vote. We've got to change the constituents' makeup. And also, we've got to give the vote to men who are not just born to it. They've, you know, the industrialists we're talking about, the entrepreneurs. And that's what the bill was for. Now, the lower classes, of course, they didn't have a chance of getting a vote. But what they believed in their hearts, that if they could get if the first lot of people in this country could get the vote, then the next lot would get the vote. And their turn would come. Isn't it, women? We had to wait till 1918, didn't we? Exactly. Anyway, Parliament did not take this very well, and Parliament was dissolved within 2 weeks of that bill being put on the table. Right, now how did the country take it? Well, the night of the illuminations, now the story of Dick's actually started, I bet you've all gone to sleep by now. But anyway, 9th to 10th of May. What it was, they wanted to now show solidarity for the Reform Bill. They wanted Parliament to know, we the ordinary people want this Reform Bill. And to show your support, you had to put a candle in your window. Swansea, oh, perfect. Every window had a candle. I think Porthcawl one, yeah. Well, there was, I think, yes. We had a few people in a few scratchings. Well, Nottage and Newton would have had candles, wouldn't they? But Merthyr, oh, they weren't so keen. There were 3 people up there who didn't have candles in their windows. 3 of them. William Thomas, William Mayrick, and James Stevens means no, that doesn't mean anything except I'm showing off. It was those 3, okay? A surgeon, a doctor, and a grocer. But the point is this. The feeling was very intense up there. Things were boiling. I told you that. Anger was starting. And a guy called Thomas Llewellyn went outside James Stevens' house and he said, give me a rope and I'll hang the... And it all kicked off. They're going to get these people because they're not supporting reform, and it started. Now, the magistrate had to come up from Swansea, a man called John Bruce. He stands and reads the Riot Act in English, and Lewis, here we are, for the first time, this man called Lewis appears, and he reads it in Welsh. It's complete chaos, everybody's shouting, you know, it's because it's anger, it is. But that's what happens. But it's during that period, now then, you've got to remember this, that Richard Lewis has a little bit of an altercation with a man called James Abbott. Right? I think he punched him. Or he punched him. They had a bit of a, they weren't so good. And James Abbott was heard to say, I'll get you back one day, boy. Or something, words to that effect. So I want you to remember that incident. That people, this night of illuminations. Okay. Now then, who were the main ironmasters at the time? I've told you that, so we won't waste time on this one. There's our Josiah John there, MP for Merthyr. After he became MP, he married Charlotte Guest. He was 47 and she was 21. And she gave him 10 kids. What a woman. Right. Now then, causes, that word is. What the heck's that? Causes of Merthyr uprising. So we've got the 8th and 9th. Right, now it kicks off. The wages are cut again. Now, 30th of May, 1831. There was always a fair in Merthyr. And people went to the fair. But this fair, at this particular time, turned into a gathering. 2,000 people who came to start this petition. They wanted to get a petition to Parliament. But this suddenly turned into another conversation, or another burst of anger, about the Court of Requests. Now, it's the Court of Requests that kicked it all off. The Court of Request was, remember now, you haven't got a job, you are owing money at a shop for food, and you can't pay it. The shopkeeper appeals to the Court of Requests. The Court of Requests grants you what you want, sends the bailiff round to the victim's house, you know, the person who can't pay, takes goods to the value of what you owe from your house, plus the costs of the court, plus the cost of the bailiff coming there. On the 30th of May, they said it's got to go. Because so many people owed so much money and all their furniture was being taken away. They just didn't see an end to this whatsoever. And it was that day they dipped a sheep's, they killed a sheep and they dipped a cloth in the blood and they held it up as a symbol of solidarity, the red flag. And that was the first time apparently when that was ever done. Anyway, so that people are angry about this Court of Requests. Now then, this is when we carry on. On the 31st of May, the next day, Lewis, remember our little friend Lewis, he owes 19 shillings, and he is the shopkeeper in Hirwain, takes him to the Court of Requests, and he's told he got to pay 6p a week, and they take his chest away from his house. Obviously he didn't like that, wasn't very pleased. So off goes the chest. There's a bit of chaos outside, but John Bruce, the magistrate, comes up again and tries to calm everything down. Okay. Right, John Bruce the next day called away to Aberdare because the Aberdare ironmaster over there says about the Cyfarthur ironworkers are getting paid too much. You should cut their wages. If I did, didn't he? He had to go over there to save his life. So he went over to Aberdare. Whilst he's gone, the crowd come to this shopkeeper in Hirwain, go into the shop, pull the chest out, and of course, start going into all the other shops. Now, Lewis, he's sort of inciting them to do it. Get your stuff. Let's go into all the shops and get our stuff. With that, there's a little bit of there's a bit of a fight. There's a bit of a crowd. It grows into a riot. And this is another thing you have to remember. Lewis saves the life of one of the special constables. A man called Shawnee Creeth, John Thomas. He saves his life that day, and that saves Lewis's life, because that is brought up in court much later. Okay, so you've got Lewis say one thing, John Bruce comes back. Anyway, the crowd are not taking any of this, and they converge then on the Castle Inn. They want to be heard. They want their stuff back. The ironmasters come down to the castle inn that night of the 2nd. Whilst they're there and the crowd are outside, they see all this smoke. This is the smoke of John Coffin's house, who is the clerk for the court of requests. His house goes up in smoke. He flees for his life because he's got all the accounts, you see. He's got the registers of who owes what. So they burn that. So, you can't have anything now. The ironmasters are inside. The crowd are converging. Crawshay sends for the soldiers. Okay. Oh, there's the castle inn today. Look at it. What a state. Bingo. There we are. Okay. Right. He sends for the troops. Down come the Highland, the Argyll and Sutherlands, the Glamorgan Light, and they come down. Some of them go into the castle inn with the ironmasters and the shopkeepers who are now in there for their lives. And there's some soldiers outside with their bayonets fixed, telling the crowd they'll get back. There are some soldiers in the top window who are watching what's happening. All right? Now then, this is when they say, the ironmasters say, right, we'll speak to 12 people. Oh, that's okay then. So he sent 12 people in, and Dic Pendaren was one of them. But after a period of talk, nothing was settled, and the men came back out. Now it is said, and there's proof, that Dic Pendaren went out through the back door, and the other 11 went out through the front door. I just want you to remember that, okay? But the troops were ordered to fire because Lewis, our friend again, was hanging off a lamppost apparently saying, come on, let's get him. With that, the crowd moved forward. A couple of the soldiers fell to the floor. The ones in the window thought these men on the floor were dead and therefore gave the order to fire. And they fired and they killed quite a few of the crowd. Okay. Now, there we are. The disturbances continued till the last disturbance was June the 6th, more or less, because there was breakouts all over the place. But a lot of people fled now and got away from the troops because they didn't want to get captured. But the troops sought them out. They went after them. And as you can see, they then went for what they perceived as the ringleaders, and Lewis and Richard Lewis were perceived as ringleaders. Dic Pendaren. Right, now when they rounded them all up, they sent them down to Cardiff jail, where they awaited the trial. Okay. Now I'll explain the trial situation to you. You had the judge, that's him up there. Oh, you can't see him, that thing. I don't know what that thing is. It's annoying. Anyway, that's Judge Bosanquet, right? And he's top dog, like in this area. And he's the judge. And so he's doing his bit. But only the prosecution counsel can call witnesses. Okay? And it's like this. He'll call his witness. The witness will speak. The defense counsel is allowed to ask the prosecution witness or cross-examine, you call it. Then the prosecution counsel is allowed to talk again. The defense counsel can't say any more. Prosecution witnesses were paid to come down from Merthyr. If the defense wanted witnesses, the prisoner had to pay. Now, do you think Dic Pendaren had any money? So there was no witnesses for the defense. Once you've cross-examined both, then, at the end of each prisoner, his trial, the prosecution counsel would then give a sum up to the jury. Defense counsel didn't. Then the judge told the jury to decide what he thought. So that wasn't very fair. Plus, things in English were done in the first party. Welsh was an interpreter, was done in the third person, and therefore the interpreter was saying what he thought they meant. So it wasn't exactly fair, right? Okay, but apart from that, if you think that's fair, we end up with this. Lewis and Dic Pendaren sentenced to death, and they were charged with intent to injury with the intent to murder. Injuring a soldier with the intent to murder. Okay? But Lewis basically was also with intent to riot. Now, Lewis, he changed his plea quite often. No, I didn't mean that. I'm not so. Dic Pendaren never changed a thing. He said, I didn't do it. I don't even know what you're talking about. I've heard about it, but I wasn't there. He says, I went home after speaking to the ringmaster, the Iron Masters, because my wife was expecting our child. Now, Dic Pendaren and his wife, he married Elizabeth Harris in 1828 in April, and they had their son Richard in November of that year, 28. But he died in October of 29. So you can imagine he's very concerned for his wife now because she's having another child. That child is born, Mary, or she's just had the child, I think, and he goes home. That child is baptised in Cardiff jail before Dick is hanged. Mary, and she doesn't live past 2 years. So there is no descendant of Dic Pendaren, okay? Anyway, the execution is set for the 30th of July. Now, in steps a man, he has a great, he's listened to this and he's watched this. He's a Quaker, he's got great compassion for these people. And from Neath, he's the Neath Abbey Works, he owns the Neath Abbey Works, and he sets about interviewing witnesses in Merthyr. All the people they couldn't call to the court. And he finds out that many things. Now, this book is huge, and you can read, if I'm able to get a copy, I'll let you know. But you've got things like whoever saw the man doing the stabbing of the soldier, Donald Black, by the way, was the name of the soldier, wore brown coat. They know Dick, everybody said, Dick was wearing blue. So on it, it had to be black, a brown coat. You've got other things he asked people about. They said, Dic Pendaren wasn't there. We saw him leave the back door. Somebody says, but I saw him. You couldn't have seen it where you were standing. You couldn't even see it. He found things that didn't ring true. And the one thing he found was James Abbott, whose testimony in the trial was the biggest damning evidence against Dic Pendaren, because when he came into the witness box, he said, it was him, I saw him do it. They know he couldn't possibly have seen him do it because James Abbott was the other side of the building. But he was a hairdresser, James Abbott, and by this time he was a special constable, and he also had an assistant called James Drew, and he threatened that guy with losing his job unless he stuck to the same story. So he did. They proved that James Abbott couldn't possibly have seen what he said he saw. In fact, on the day Dic Pendaren was hanged, the crowd turned on James Abbott's house and smashed all his windows and ran him out of town. But there we are. Just remember, James Abbott's testimony was the main testimony that put the noose around Dick's neck. Even though this Tregellis Price, and he got a petition going, and he wrote to Lord Melbourne. And Lord Melbourne actually stayed the execution. He said, right, okay, this makes sense. Because even Lord Melbourne, it actually says in this letter, I'm not too sure about this James Abbott's testimony. It doesn't seem to have much validity to me. See? Anyway, because of this, there's a stay of execution for a fortnight. But as you know, I've told you that, just told you that, okay? But the main thing is, when Donald Black was called to the stand, he said, I don't know who stabbed me. He said, I don't think it was him. I never saw him. Dic Pendaren. The man himself, he said, I don't know who stabbed me, but I don't think it was him. I don't remember a blue coat sort of thing. They've got the trials, what they call them, the transcript. And he actually says, I didn't see it, and I don't think it's him. And he's the man who, and they don't kill him, remember? But in those days, if you injured a soldier of the crown, it was the same as murder. All right? Okay. Now, Crawshay provided that what little help it was, he provided a counsellor to be with Dick, to help him, and the others, because there were a lot of them, a man called Henry Socket, lovely name. He couldn't do much, but he did do some very good cross-examining for some of them. But Crawshay provided that. Crawshay actually was he was the Iron Master that was nearest to the people. All right? There we are. I've told you that. The barristers did not present Dick's view at all. Even the judge just began to have doubts. And I've told you that as well. So you can see it's all built on very fragile evidence. Very fragile evidence. So why did Dick hang? Well, someone had to die. 700 riots. French Revolution. Somebody. You had to stop it somewhere. Now, Lewis was reprieved because he wasn't the man who actually stabbed the soldier. He was sent to Australia on a prison ship, with quite a few of the others, mind. At first, he was sent, after Dick was hanged on the 13th, 20 of them were sent to the Thames on a prison hulk called the Justitia. And they were there until January, when they were then transported to Australia on the John. There was a ship called the John. And Lewis died in Australia in 1847. He never came home. He died a prisoner. But after his death, he was actually pardoned. It's the first time they've pardoned a dead man. Because he had just died before. And the same year he died, the judge died, 1847, and Henry Socket died, 1847. Just thought I'd throw that in. All right? Okay. And they also think possibly I don't think he was confused with Lewis. I just think someone had to take the rap. That's what I think. You can, you read more, you think more. Right then. But in 1874 in America, on his deathbed, Ian Parker from Carmarthen, who was at those riots, he was there, confesses to the Reverend Evans, I stabbed Donald Black. So, yeah, there we are. There's Dick's execution register. As I said, his daughter was baptized in front of him on the 25th of July, and Dick then was sentenced to hang. I hate to tell you this, they hanged him at 8 o'clock in the morning. They couldn't find a hangman to do it. In the end, they agreed that a man took the money. He said, I'll do it then if I can have the money, I'm desperate. He wasn't a hangman. Dick, it took 3 times to hang him, and in the end, the man was hanging on his feet to try and make him heavy enough. And he hanged him outside Cardiff Jail, which today is Cardiff Market. And if you go to the entrance of Cardiff Market on Mary Street side, you'll see the plaque that says Dic Penderyn was hanged here on August the 13th, 1831. His body was left to hang for an hour so that the school boys could see it on the way to school, so that they knew that you don't want to end up like that, so you don't mess with the authorities. It's a lesson to them. They cut the body down at 9 o'clock. They put it on a cart, and then the authorities wanted Dick bodies out of Cardiff as fast as possible, because people were rising again. He's becoming a martyr now, isn't he? He's becoming a hero to them. And they put him on a cart and they took him down the A48. I mean, it's the only way I can tell you that. I know it sounds a bit flippant. And on the way down the A48, more people joined the cortege. And they say, but I think this is folklore, a white dove came down, onto the coffin. But anyway, when they got down to Aberavon, to St. Mary's Church, because that's where Dick was from, because they said, get him back to where he came from. Now then, if you're a criminal, you're buried in consecrated ground. Yep. And you're not allowed to have a religious burial. Well, Dick was allowed a religious burial, and 4 ministers spoke at his funeral. I think once they'd killed him, they didn't. Hanged him. The authorities didn't want anything else to do with it. They'd done what they wanted to do, and I don't think it sat well with them either. But down he came. Okay, I've said that. Now, the grave that he was initially put in isn't the one he's in today. Here we go again. When they built the motorway, they had to move his grave because the graveyard was much bigger than what it is today. They brought it in, they moved the church walls, and then they brought the graves inside. And they think he was put in the grave of the Cowns, which they think were a distant relative of Dick's. All right? And if you go to St. Mary's Church, there's the church. You can see it from the motorway. From what they call the ring. No, it's not the motorway, is it? It's the bypass road type of thing, isn't it? And there's the grave there. And that headstone was put there in 1965 by the trade unions. Now, what we have to understand is Dick died in 1831. Nobody was allowed to speak about this man because he was a traitor. You've got to remember that. And nobody wanted to be associated with him. The family just didn't say anything. They wanted it to die down, right? They know it was an injustice, but they wanted it to die down. And it did go into the annals of time. You know, it did go. Gwynalf Williams talks about people with scaremonger, like apparently his grandmother or his great-grandmother, she said, oh, I bought Dick's ear for £6 in Merthyr Market, you know. They had all these silly stories about him. But the main thing, where he comes to where he is today, happens in the strike of 1926. We are back in the Depression. Wales need a hero. And the Western Mail writes the story of Dic Pendaren for other working class people to know that somebody's already died for what they are fighting for. And it takes off from then. Dic Pendaren, from that moment, becomes more well-known and becomes this figurehead of this working-class hero. And that's why the trade unions then, when they move the grave, when they do the bypass and they have to move the grave in, they put him they put a stone on there and they pay for the stone. So the trade unions pay for that stone in 1965. And there it is, in memory of Richard Lewis, executed at Cardiff for the part he played during the industrial riots in Merthyr Tydfil in June 1831. Buried on the 14th of August, 1831, aged 23. It's terrible, isn't it? So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. You've done very well to stay there. I think I've remembered most. And I'm asking you hero or villain. I think I possibly persuaded you. I think there is only one thing he could be. Now, you can go, you can ask me questions, but I have done a little film if you'd like to see it. You don't have to. I did it to Martin Joseph. No, he's no relation. If he was, I'd be rich. He's a very great folk singer in Cardiff, and he wrote a song in memory of Dic Pendaren. And all I've done is put pictures to it. You will notice there's mistakes, and I've told you why there are mistakes. I was ignorant before I read Steffan ap David's book. All right, so I'll start that now.
Thunder rolled and the rain came down St. Mary Street. But on this day thousands stood their ground, a silent crowd as heads bowed in helplessness bid farewell. And the wife of Richard Pendaren, supported there too weak to stand, disbelieving anger and sorrow for her innocent man, an innocent man. She said, lift me up, oh lift me, boys, let me see the one I love. Lift me up, oh lift me, boys, let me see the man I love. Broken by starvation and poverty, while the iron masters sipped their wine, we young and old together marched for justice, but the bayonet and the bullets what they find. And bread or blood, her cried a collier, we come too far lads now to run. Merthyr town in 1831, they were cut down by the government guns. And in the midst of senseless slaughter, a soldier wounded in the thigh, who later swore on oath at the trial Dic Pendaren was not the guy. And though he stood for everything they wanted and rose with his people on that day, well, it could not have been he that harmed the soldier, but someday with a grudge put him away. Said they'd stitch him up someday. Despite petitions then and cries for mercy, all that the facts had to say, neither king nor his parliament would listen. Even the judge was turned away. So hey, Lord Melbourne, how did you sleep then, with all that evidence in your face? Well, you shut down 24, so why not hang someone? Yeah, you got to keep those workers in their place. And he slowly climbed the steps to the gallows pole, the last few moments of a life, as his eyes survey the crowd of gallant for his wife. He can't see his wife. She said, lift me up, oh lift me, boys. Let me see the one I love. Lift me up, oh lift me, boys. Let me see the man I love one more time. So louder and longer than the sound of guns is the memory of what was done. Well, you can only trample people down for so long. Time will show you have not won. And long before all this, on a hill in Palestine, they strung another one up, they say was a friend of yours and mine, dying in the place of another one. But in the morning comes the sun. In the morning the sun. Lift me up, oh lift me. Let me see the one I love. Lift me up, oh lift me. Let me see the one I love one more time. Lift me up, oh lift me, boys. Let me see the one I love one more time. Lift me up, oh lift me, boys. Let me see the one I love one more time. One more time. One more time.
Right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ceri. Any questions?
Was Dick ever granted a pardon?
Now, that's exact. Well, thank you for that question, because that's what I forgot to say. All that research was done in support of the pardon, which they sent to Parliament in 2015, and they're still waiting for an answer. All right? Brexit, maybe, I don't know. But it's 2015, they sent it to Parliament. So we're waiting for that.
Ceri, where was the man who confessed living all that time before he confessed?
Well, they think he'd gone to America. They think he fled, see? He got out to Merthyr as fast as he could, because a lot of them, if you remember, I said up to June the 6th, the riots went on, and then it took, oh, I didn't say that, so I didn't tell you this bit. It took them until June the 20th to round everybody up. But of course, some got away. And obviously, he got away. And I think the new world was opening up, wasn't it? America was the place to go, I would have said. And he made his way there.
Any other questions?
I'd like to tell you one thing which I found out, if you don't mind me saying. When 1832 was the first Reform Act, and we know that John Guest was the first MP for Merthyr, what I found out today was that was the first time William Ewart Gladstone was elected for Newark-on-Trent. And to think, you know, he went all the way through to be Prime Minister, but I thought, you know, he's a big, quite an important, prestigious name, and he started in 1832 as well, so... Don't ask me anything in Welsh now, John.
No, promise, Ceri. I wonder, we hear so much about Captain Crawshay himself and John Guest and the building of the railways. Was there any feeling of remorse on behalf of these people? Some are said to have done a lot for cottage hospitals to try to do a lot for the people of the area. I was wondering, was there any contrition, any particular concern expressed by themselves as a result of this?
Now, the answer to that is, I know exactly where it comes from. It was the wives. It was the women. It's Rose Crawshay did that. It's Charlotte Guest that did that. The men did the business. This new emerging liberal social conscience was brought forth by the women, because they were the wives of these very rich men, and they saw the light, you know, being, I would say, with time on their hands, and they saw what was happening to the people around them, because Rose Crawshay and Charlotte Guest did an incredible amount for their workers, you could say. They really did. Oh, it's my phone, sorry. I thought I turned that off. Crawshay, though, to add to one more point, he did have more sympathy with the workers. But there again, he can say it, he can do a little bit, but he still lived in that house. But his wife did an awful lot, Rose Crawshay, because she, of course, became the first vice president of the Suffragette League in this area as well. Both women, very, you know, if that's any answer to you, I know those two women did. Yeah.
Crawshays, where did the Crawshays and the Guests come from to come to South Wales?
Oh, gosh. Now then. Guests. Shropshire? Was it Shropshire? Whitehaven, was it Cumbria? Bacon came down from Cumbria. He came down as MPs. Anthony Bacon did. England. I say England to you. If that makes it easier, you know.
Yeah, I took that for granted.
Yeah. Bosley. Hang on. Bosley. One was Bosley up in Shropshire. That's Guest. That was Guest. Now, Crawshay, I don't know, but I would imagine it would be from some area that already had some industrial development, because that's how the Brogdons came to Porthcawl. They were already had some success up in Manchester and then spread.
So they were already wealthy people before they came to...
They already had money to invest. They didn't become have the wealth they had eventually, but they had the money to invest, yes.
I remember somebody telling me that Crawshay came from Derby.
Oh,
No,
well, that could well be right. Please, I don't know.
Another kind of colour is, I don't know whether it uses this, but his grave is covered in a huge slab of granite, and on it is inscribed, God forgive me, not may God forgive me,
God
it's a
forgive me.
command.
That's Crawshay, by the way, yes. Ah, right, well, there you, I told you Crawshay had more feeling. He did have a little bit. There we are. Yes. Sorry.
This is more of an anecdote, actually. In the 70s, my daughter was studying medicine in London, and during the summer holidays, she was home, and an aunt, a very elderly aunt, from Cairo, I say, phoned me up and said, Jeff, bring her up here, I've got something very, very good to show her. We went up to Coiney Road, Cairo, and there was a fabulous, very large, leather-bound book. It was, in fact, the logbook, as it were, of the local midwife. many, many years before. And our Catherine was looking through this book, and she says, "My God, Dad, look at this." There was in the inventory comment, today the lady concerned had to be delivered of her baby outside on the pavement because that morning her husband had been killed in a fall in the colliery. That was about 8:30 or whatever. By 9:30, new family was shunted in, and she was out with her kids and the newborn baby at the same time outside. And that was in the 20s.
Oh, God.
It was incredible. Unbelievable.
Quite awful. Quite awful.
The Winbourne estate still have a hold on Porthcawl.
Oh, right.
The land on which All Saints Church is built was granted from the Winbourne estates. And at one time, because the present rectory is on unstable ground, the parochial church council had the idea of building in the rest of the ground that's free at All Saints, and we weren't allowed to because of some clause in the gift of the land to the church.
Oh, gosh, right. Well, I know in the museum we've got, haven't we, Peter? Haven't we got the book, The Sales of 1914 for the Winbourne estate?
The Winbourne estate had about 1,000 acres, yeah.
But the auction was 1914, wasn't it? I think we've got the auction book. Yes, sorry. Peter works in the archives in the museum.
I've just remembered the name of the village that Crawshay's grave is. It's Vaynor.
Oh, Vaynor.
Vaynor
Pendaren. Oh, yeah, that's a school up there, yeah. Yeah.
God forgive me.
God forgive, yeah. Very much so. Very much so.
Any other questions? Sorry.
Lewis, the huntsman, never lived in Merthyr. He lived in Penderyn.
Yeah.
That's what he said, he did all his records.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your theory is that he was the illegitimate son of a...
Oh, yes. Well, I didn't bring that up. I thought that was gossip. I know, you're right. They think he got off because of that, yes. Yes, you're right. But they think he was from Pendaren. They thought he had a link to Pendaren.
Yeah, well, anyway, next.
Yeah, quite, yeah. Sorry, Mr. Thomas.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that was absolutely fascinating, I think you'll agree. There's an old saying, isn't there, the good old days. I think it was nothing like, was it? I mean, it was absolutely dreadful conditions. You called him hero or villain. Could he possibly be a victim?
Oh, yes. Where I got that term hero or villain was a bit of a cheat. As I said, I did this about 10, 12 years ago. I was teaching then. Jerry Toms, the superintendent or chief superintendent of police, he did a couple of programs for HTV. And he, in his way, proved that Dick Pendaren was guilty and he was a villain. You want to see the program? He absolutely says he deserved to hang because according to the laws of the day, he did it. But if you look at the records now in the court transcript, isn't it, that this other chap's found, there's no way he could have done it. But Jerry Toms, you want to find that program? I've got a little bit of it in the house, but I was quite surprised by it, and that's where I got it. He put hero or villain, and he ended up saying he was a villain. But I think you're right. I think he's a victim. Yeah. Yes, I think so.
Did you say Roger was your history teacher?
Yes.
Roger, you did a very, very good job, mate.
Thank you.
Just like to say thank you to Ceri once more. That was superb. Great big round of applause, please.
Thank you.